Welcome, everybody. So happy about this webinar, because when I reached out to the panelists, everybody immediately said yes. And I was so blown away because I know how busy many of the panelists are. So I want to give a special thanks to them as well. What the focus of this webinar is going to be stems from issues that I started dealing with the last month as people were madly writing me saying, I need help. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I really believe in inquiry. I want to teach that way. How do I teach children in rows 6 feet apart? I'm going to quit. I'm not going to teach anymore. And I said to myself, I have to have a webinar. I've got to pull people together and we've got to present possibilities. Maybe we don't have full answers, but we can have a rich conversation on some possibilities to help people reimagine. The other issue, of course, is the access and equity issue and ensuring that kids have access if districts are going fully online. So we're going to, I'm going to introduce you to the panelists in a minute, but I want to also quickly say that you may know that NCTM and NCSM wrote a position paper in June, and they talked about 3 things that are really important as we move into September. And Robert Berry, one of the panelists, can add some more insights into this document as we get started, because he was one of the writers of the document. One of the things that they mention is how we have to think of the structures that we're using. We have to make sure that we have heterogeneous ability groups. We have to be mindful of potential inequities, such as access to the technology. We have to create strategically mixed groups of students with a variety of strengths and use rich tasks in a variety of media. In other words, we've got to do the good teaching and not abandon it because we have moved to online or blended models. And we have to prioritize mathematics teaching by allowing even more time for it and fortifying intervention plans. Let's go to the next slide. The second point is the teaching practices. I won't spend much time here. These are the 8 principles that we're probably all very familiar with. And you can read that document too if you just Google, go to NCTM's site and Google the doc. Let's go to the next slide. And advocacy, and the document mentions budgets, and we have to make sure that there are that there is access to everyone and allot money to ensure that that's happening. There are a variety of ways that the document mentions that we can do that. I'm sure Robert will mention it too, and it's going to come up in our session. Assessments, and we should focus on formative assessments to emphasize the teaching instruction related to where kids are, and not focus so much on summative assessments. And there's even an encouragement that districts might consider waiving district summative assessments. And then the professional learning piece, that we can't abandon that. It's more critical now than ever, and that we need to focus on the math content for teachers and on online teaching tools, and allot time for teachers to have time for collaboration to help each other. So let me move on to introducing the panel. So Emily is up on the top. And Emily is a kindergarten teacher in the DC, Maryland area, and she is also an associate of mine, a colleague at New Perspectives on Learning. Walter Wakeman is the program director of elementary mathematics, science, and enrichment at Fairfield Public Schools in Connecticut. David Woods is senior director. Whoops, sorry, David, I skipped. Sorry, Joe Bowler. I'm looking at my notes here and got sidetracked and didn't look at the screen. Joe is nominally Olivier Professor of Education. Did I pronounce that correctly, Joe?
Yes.
Olivier? Yeah. At Stanford University. And Robert Berry is, there we go, Robert, is the Samuel Braley Gray Professor of Math Education at the University of Virginia. And Robert is the past president of NCTM. And as I mentioned a minute ago, one of the writers of the NCTM doc that I mentioned. David Woods is Senior Director of Curriculum and Reporting at DreamBox Learning. And Mike Flynn is the Director of Math Leadership Programs at Mount Holyoke College. We're going to start with each panelist. There's two people that have been trying. Christina, thank goodness. All right, looks like Christina is coming in. She's been having webcam problems. Christina Moore is an assistant principal at LAUSD, and she is chair of the Equity, Access, and Empowerment Committee of the Southern Section of CMC. And Dina Williams has been trying as well, and so she should be in shortly. And Dina is a retired teacher and past coordinator of mathematics in LAUSD, and she is a member of the Reimagining Math Instruction Committee of CMC, and also an associate of New Perspectives on Learning. So hopefully Christina and Dina, we will see their faces in just a minute, but I'm going to go on. We're behind the scenes still helping them get their webcams active. So each of us is going to have 2 minutes, each of the panelists, I'll be the moderator, each of the panelists will have 2 minutes to talk about the main issues that they want to bring up for discussion. And since, and then I've made notes, I know what they want to talk about already, and then we're going to spend, after their 2 minutes, we're going to spend the rest of the time in a more interactive discussion. So I've asked people not to use PowerPoints so that we can have more of a back and forth, going back and forth to really talk about the issues, and more on a sort of CNN model where we're on the screen instead of giving addresses. There's Christina. Okay. So Robert, I want to start with you because you were a writer and you can pick up on some of the points made in that document.
Sure, Cathy. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. So the Moving Forward document was published by NCTM. It was a collaboration between NCTM and NCSM. And particularly this document, it attends to some of those issues that people have raised about, so what happens when we go back to school in the fall, and what things should we consider? And what are some of the big ideas, and what advice one may have? And so the document's organized around 3 kind of big themes. And as Cathy spoke, she spoke to those 3 big themes: structure, teaching, and advocacy. And so I'm just going to touch a little bit on each of the big themes because I don't have time to go in depth, but I do want to raise some thoughts here. And so around the issues around structure. Structure is really, some of the conversation around that, it's about grouping and ability grouping, but more or less about, caution about using a diagnostic assessments right out the gate to group kids based on those diagnostic assessments, because there's a feeling that kids may have missed something at the end of last school year. And so we're pushing back on that notion. And in fact, we're pushing, when we say we're pushing back on that notion, perhaps time may be better spent to think about how do I organize instruction around big ideas and connect those things that kids may have had unfinished learning about in the previous year, and how do we embed it to continue learning to move forward. And so the idea of using diagnostic assessment tended then to the group kids is something that I want us to give thought to and probably put pause on. The other thing that we discussed is issue around is teaching. And teaching is, really the 8 effective teaching practices as Cathy brought up, but more or less, what about those curriculum models and curricula access to curriculum, and how would, while teachers might have access to materials, how do then students and parents access those materials? Whether it is, whether it is some type of text or technology or even just kind of time allocation. So teaching, when we think about how much time, if we are in a remote situation, how much time should students be in front of a computer or in front of technology as they engage in this process? And so considering the time, and does that time have to align with brick and mortar situation? Perhaps there might be some flexibility in that time. And the third one's advocacy. And advocacy is about opportunities for teachers to collaborate with one another. Because in the current context, teachers are latching on and learning new things. And so they're, rather than being independent of one another, how do we then create spaces for them to collaborate around ideas and context, around ideas about teaching, and around ideas about really their own professional care and their own self-care? And so, I think we have to consider those things as well. So those are my 2 minutes, and I'll pass it on to the next panelists.
Great. Let's go to you next, Joe, because I think you're going to hit already on the issue about what you want to do, and it's going to match nicely with what Robert just said.
Okay, hi everybody. I first just want to say we're in such a hard time. I just take my hats off to all the teachers out there. This is so difficult. I'm now teaching my own class online, and yeah, it's very hard. So I'm just gonna in a very short time tell you my principles for teaching online, and I hope that's helpful to you. I have a principle of not really speaking for more than 5 minutes, and that's to adults. I bring that down if they're younger, and always stop and ask people to do something. And it can just be asking a question where people respond with hands or signals or write on a Google Doc. I really want people to work collaboratively on math. So I'm asking everyone to jump into a Google Jamboard where we do maths together with visuals. We work collaboratively. I'm trying to do a lot to help people's well-being. We start the first lesson always with I ask people to write a little maths history for me so I understand what maths has been like for them. We do work where we share what's good and bad about working on Zoom together so we can take that into account. I'm just going to throw out a couple of resources. If you're K3, I particularly empathize because it's so much harder for the little kids. And we have a new page on YouTube called Maths at Home that has lots of lovely resources for getting kids to use numbers around the home and to pull things, to go away and find things in their home and bring them back to the teacher. I have a new free course on data science that has lots of ideas around bringing data into the classroom, which is another great one when kids are online. Data visualizations are beautiful. So I think my 2 minutes are up, but in Q&A, ask me any questions.
We'll come back to those, though. You'll have lots more time because we want to hear all the, the principles and how you're using them too. Mike, let's go to you.
Sure, I'll jump in with a little different perspective. So I've been doing distance learning since 2013 by choice, right? This is different than for all the teachers out there who had to pivot and try to figure out how to do this really quickly. And over the course of my time doing distance learning, I've learned a lot of things, and I just want to share a couple of quick things that are really helpful for anyone working in this space. And the first big thing is that good online teaching starts with just good teaching. So your instincts as teachers that work in the classroom, those still are at play in distance learning. It's really important to think about the role of technology is more of a supporting tool to allow you to engage your students the same way you would in the classroom. So the learning for you is on figuring out how to use the technology to leverage the things that you already know how to do. I think the hard thing for people when they had to pivot was their instincts that they had in the classroom didn't feel like they worked in this space. And really what they just need to do is get comfortable with the technology to figure out how their teaching instincts also still work here. And the second thing is that I'd like to have people think about a way of planning where you're not having to plan for multiple contingencies and have one plan if this is what happens, and then another plan if this is what happens. Teachers, our time is precious. Like, we have very little of it, and we want to use our time wisely. So not making a bunch of different lesson plans is really helpful. So one model that I found helpful for us at the college is, and it works K-12, I've been supporting a lot of K-12 schools now with this, is to plan for a hybrid model as your baseline, because a hybrid model means some people on campus or in class and some people online. And because if you're planning with that model in mind, if for some reason things get bad and we have to go all online, the plan stays the same because you've already accounted for the online participation. If you're able to have some students in class, it still stays the same. If you have more students in class, it still stays the same. And so the idea is learning to think of two audiences at the same time, but then plan with materials that are accessible to both audiences that don't require you having to make two completely separate sets of learning experiences. You can actually blend them together for something that's high-end, high-engaging, and doesn't take double the amount of time that you have as teachers for planning. So I think that's my 2 minutes, but that's some of my advice right now.
Great. Christina.
Hi, I just wanted to say I was in the classroom for 17 and a half years, and I really think of myself as a teacher leader. But from the document, the NCTM, NCSM Moving Forward document, one of the recommendations is build and sustain a positive identity and disposition toward mathematics for all teachers and students. And that is something that I am very passionate about, is building formidable mathematical identities, filling students' buckets with giving them tools for social emotional learning so that they can truly embrace the mathematics. One of my most favorite quotes is from Francis Su in his book about human flourishing in mathematics. You cannot separate the proper practice of mathematics from what it means to be human. And I think if that is our lens, our point of view, that we do everything from that, we will make decisions that are equitable, that cherish students, and help our teachers build capacity and find their own powerful mathematical identities so that they can pass that on and model it to their students.
Great. Emily.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to tag team on Mike Flynn's comments because I have experienced Mount Holyoke's program because I'm in it. And so I've experienced the blended learning model. And I totally agree with what Mike said about good teaching, and that technology is just a way that something we need to use right now, but we still want to focus on those good teaching methods. And I work with young children. I work in kindergarten right now, and I work with our first, second, third, and fourth grade teachers. And particularly with our younger learners, something we always try to do is model for children how to work with other children. And that's a big thing to learn when you're a young child. But we know that collaborating and talking to each other and working together is a really important thing in the math workshop classroom, particularly in those younger years when they're just learning how to work together. So one thing I've been thinking about is how to help children learn how to work together with a partner. And in my normal teaching practice, I'm figuring out how to do that good for children. So in thinking about possibly doing kindergarten or first or second online or some sort of hybrid situation, that importance of modeling how to work with another student and or the teacher still in an online model or a hybrid model, or in the classroom when you kind of have to stay a little bit far apart from each other or you have a mask on. But modeling for children some like sort of concrete strategies of how you can still do that. And I also want to touch on something that Joe said around using online tools. And another important thing is when kids are working and collaborating together is they're seeing each other's work. And so there are some tools, like Seesaw is one that we use with the younger kids that they can pick up and use really easily. There's tools like that we can use as teachers to still take pictures of or short videos of children's work to share with each other and bring it up in ways to share with each other. So I think there's lots of opportunities to.
Great. Maybe
Yeah.
we can go into some of those details
Mhm.
too as we move into discussion, Emily. Okay, Walter?
I just want to first say thank you to Cathy for the opportunity to be part of this discussion. This is fantastic. This has been a lot of work that we've been engaged in. Just to give you a little context, we've been one-to-one for a couple of years now with our middle school through high school with technology. But for our elementary folks, this was a pivot turn, a huge learning curve. So I just have to give a huge shout out to the tremendous amount of work that our IT department did, our library media people, and the classroom teachers above all, and lifting this off the ground. We went from direct classroom to on distance learning in 3 days. It was a massive learning curve for everybody. And what we found initially was that teachers were sort of posting daily assignments for all the content areas they teach. That was not sustainable. We found that out very quickly. And had to pull back and provide breathing room for teachers to, a day of planning and that kind of thing. And then by the end of June, or by the end of the school year, teachers started to settle into their routines a little bit more. And some of the things I'm sharing with you is really feedback from quite a few teachers, because we brought teachers back to reflect on the experience, what worked, and what do we need to think about and do differently, because we can't enter the fall the way we had entered into this situation. And so with some colleagues and program directors, we focused really on 4 major areas. We're looking at the culture. How do we establish the culture? And the classroom, that community of learners, the relationship that teachers have with kids, the relationship kids have with kids. And if we're in a distance learning environment when we return, how is a teacher going to do that? The other is engagement. How are we engaging kids in deep reflective practice around mathematics and mathematical ideas? The other is instructional design. How are we providing resources, focusing on the big ideas and the development of big ideas within a unit? And finally, the last part is really about monitoring and evaluating students. How are we gathering information from them? And we've made quite a number of decisions around that as a team. It's really been a team effort here. And we're in the process now of providing resources and providing sort of a central location for people to share those ideas and opportunities for teachers to collaborate. This is very much a work in progress for us. As I mentioned, this is a lot of new learning for us. We have been learning feverishly from people who have been doing this for many years. So we really appreciate the feedback, but I'm certainly happy to share our learning in this process.
Great. And David.
Yeah, thank you, Cathy, for putting this together and for everyone taking the time to join this amazing panel. Going towards the last is tough because everyone on here just said everything that you could possibly think of around what we're trying to address. But I want to double down on a couple things. Equity, access, and opportunity, right? Our opportunity gap is going to be accented in this time frame. There's been some studies early on about high poverty areas, those students being given packets more so than digital or technological advances. I love how Emily had talked about technology being a tool, right? It is not the end all answer to the challenges that we're faced with today. We're about to have or have had parents really come into the fold around their kids' education, right? Through them having to work from home, manage work, and keep up with their child's education. It's going to be a great forcing function and opportunity for us to engage parents in the learning process. So even as we talked about, what a K-2 student has to learn how to work with each other and model with each other, so do parents, so do educators. We're now going to be on the parents' time frame much more. They're going to need information not between 3:15 and 3:45 p.m. because that's when school ended. They're going to need it at 10 o'clock, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. And so at DreamBox, we're very conscientious about trying to support this new environment we're in through 3 C's, building a strong community, engaging communication, making it on their time frame, and then having an immense amount of compassion. And we have some strategies that we'll dig into later. But that's kind of how we're thinking about the challenges that are faced with today.
Great, thanks, David. All right, let's start with one of the issues that I heard in a couple of statements. You just mentioned, David, about parents, and Robert, you brought that up when you started. So I'll throw out some things that I've been trying to do. You can comment on them and offer other ideas you might have. How do we go about dealing with the access and equity issue? And this requires ensuring that everybody can get online, as well as involving parents in the teaching, because they're going to have to be partners in this. I read recently, and Joe, you may know about this because you're in San Francisco, that San Francisco is opening with online learning, and they've opened up 40 centers around the city. So I'm curious what you think about that. And if anyone wants to jump in and talk about other models they've heard of that people also are doing, districts that are going fully online, how are they ensuring that everybody has equity and access?
I could jump in real quick and talk about rural. Some of the communities that I've had the privilege of working with, rural communities in Washington State. One thing they're learning is how much access there actually is to devices. And these are some high poverty rural areas. The idea of BYOD, bring your own device, right? One of the ways they're addressing this is figuring out how to integrate the home iPads, the home laptops, the home Chromebooks, so that while they're not one-to-one, they get closer to that one-to-one. How can they share a device with 3 siblings in the K-12 district that they're in to try to meet that need? So that's one strategy I've observed in the rural high poverty areas. And even these districts, they thought they had thousands of students, like 1,200 students who weren't going to have a device, and they found out through their, they did a survey that it was actually 88, and it was roughly 27 families. That may not be as applicable to San Francisco, that's a massive city, but these smaller rural communities that are high poverty, they're finding unique ways to address that.
Well, as you know, well, in LAUSD, you know that we are the 2nd largest district in the United States, having over 670,000 students, 1,300 schools. So we had to, like Walter said, we had to pivot, but it's a behemoth that's pivoting. And we made sure that each of our students were given devices and hotspots if they were needed. So that is how we were able to do that. But there's still some issues, because depending on where people live, the internet, even though they have a hotspot, it might not be up to par. So there are extensive, issues in that way, but we are definitely working as hard as we can. And not only are we going to provide daily face-to-face instruction, but we are also going to be offering Saturday tutoring after school. So there's going to be a lot of options to help our students. But I really wanted to say, I don't think that we should focus on the deficits, because some of our students could have learned in different ways. So I don't want to always focus on what they have missed, but what have they gained, and how do we meet each child's needs where they are?
I was fascinated by the San Francisco model, because I have been thinking for a long time that we need to have learning centers in communities and provide more access to parents as an integral part of the teaching, and not have it only be the brick and mortar school. That we need to maybe give some hard thinking about how to take down the walls. Technology allows us the ability to take down the walls. So one of the things that I've been trying to do since March is write notes for each one of my CFLM units. I've finished K2 now, and I've been writing 2 to 3 pages on each unit for parents. Parent-friendly language, teachers can either send it home with children if it's a blended learning model that people move into. If it's a fully online model, they can mail packets home to parents. I tried to go low tech, rely on technology based on cell phone use. We're giving tips to parents where they can take pictures of children's work, giving them an idea of what the investigation is that the kids are working on. They get in the packet all the appendices. We're giving the appendices away free to all parents. And then telling them if they have a webcam, now this assumes some technology, if they have a picture on their camera that they can take a picture or a quick video of what their child is talking about and email it to the teacher. That gets in the hands of the teacher the information, so the teacher then can reach out and have a phone conference call with that child. I've also put in tips about how kids can FaceTime together so that they have a social collaborator. And so I've been trying to think about how to involve parents. And so when I read the article about what San Francisco is doing, I found that quite interesting. I also, just to jump in about New York City did the same thing, Christina, that they got someone to fund it, that LAUSD did. So all the kids have devices. Anyone else want to comment on that issue before we move away from it and go to some other points?
I just wanted to make a comment, not so much about access with parents, but that this is a real opportunity. Parents are right in the classroom. They're seeing the lessons. There is some concern about, you've heard the old stories about I'm working on building a concept and the parent teaches them the standard algorithm and then I've got to, help support the child. They're seeing mini lessons that teachers are creating, video clips of what teachers are creating, samples of student work, for example, and sharing that. So it's really become opening our practice. It's opening the classroom door to the general community at large. Mm-hmm. So I think of this as a real opportunity to take advantage of as we move forward.
Yeah, it was fun writing the notes. I thought the same thing. This is an opportunity to let them know, develop their number sense too. Tell them what strategies they might see. Someone started to say something. Go ahead, Mike.
For access for parents is just recognizing how busy families are. As a father of 4 teenagers who went through distance learning, the amount of information that comes home, and it's good stuff. Teachers are all well-intentioned, but as teachers are busy and they're just sending home as much information to support parents as possible, as a parent trying to digest it is very hard. So one of the things that's really helpful, and I recommend this article, which has nothing to do with education, but can help us out, which is called How to Write for Scannable Audiences. And the idea is that we, as a busy society, as internet consumers, are more scanners than readers today. So we can actually structure our emails, our messages, our plans to families in a way that takes into account what marketers use. It actually is really helpful. I've seen some of my kids' teachers do this, and it was a breath of fresh air to get a nice, crisp email that had really quick bullet points, and it made it easier for all of us to stay organized. And I think if we do that, we're ensuring more people are going to read the information, and therefore the students are going to have a better experience, parents are going to have a better experience. So just one tip for folks.
Yeah, sounds great, Mike. Yeah. Anyone else want to comment on that?
So, last night I had the pleasure of listening to Hillary Kreisberg, and she talked about this issue with parents. And one of the things that she said that was provocative for me was the idea that in some schools where schools are using any kinds of applications, whether it's for their instruction and teaching or whether communicating with parents, she found that there are schools that are using multiple applications. And the issue with multiple applications is that parents are then overloaded with a lot of technology issues. And so it now becomes the issue of making the decision, what are the central pieces of applications that a school would use? because there may be something used in early elementary classrooms and upper elementary and then middle and high school, and if they're different or if there's variance there, and parents have children in multiple grade bands, that could become a challenge in dealing with information. So
Yeah.
how you access tools and the kinds of tools that students use and the communication with parents, they have to be seamless in many ways so the parents won't be overloaded.
I tried to make my notes in bullets, and the only reason they're 2 to 3 pages long is because they tell what the activity is, so parents can actually do it with their kids and have fun. They're free access right now if anyone wants to look at them. They're on New Perspectives on Learning. You don't need a password to get into that site. That's my open website. And I've now finished K2. And so you're welcome, anyone is welcome to go and look at those. They will eventually be moved over when we release our online tools that we're currently developing and will be releasing before September. They will be moved over to our website that people using Context for Learning that have bought the support system to go with it only will have access to them. But right now they're free, open access, so anyone's welcome to go. Dina, welcome. You didn't even get your 2 minutes about the main issues you wanted to talk about. Do you want to jump in right there and just say what the main points you'd like to have discussion on are?
Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. I've been listening to everything. I've been here for about 30 minutes, but you know, Joe had a tweet last week about learning. True learning is with failure only. And I want to add to that true learning is not only with failure, it's only about the motivation to get to do what you want. If you're not motivated to do something, failure doesn't help you because you won't keep trying. But what I want to talk about is the change in our world, not just having to move to technology, but making sure that we give students access and try to build their agency. And agency is them having identity and the knowledge that they can solve any kind of problem from wherever they are in the room. And I liken that to having access from any place you are. We all tried to get to Chicago, but we didn't all take the same route. And a lot of times our teaching is on this one trajectory of teaching what we think they should start and where we think they should end. But as long as they have starting points all along from where they are, we need to make sure that that happens with whatever we're teaching and whenever we're teaching. So the way we teach and how we do things, those low floor, high ceiling tasks, constraints, built-in modeling is important for especially Black and brown kids because we are in the Black Lives Matter movement, and that change in the world is important. And it's important that we not only get to the technology, but get to ways in which we've been teaching and failing to teach students, regardless of whether or not we were in the room with them or we're online with them. So that's my passion. And that's what I'd like to maybe talk about, but I know we only have a few minutes,
That's
not
right.
a long time.
I'm so glad you're bringing that up, and I'm hearing that call to go back to Joe because she's going to give us some more tips on how she's doing that. And what you brought up so nicely, Dina, is that the equity and access issue is about ensuring also that we're teaching in ways that are low floor, high ceiling, multiple entry points. And this demands a different way of using technology than most of us may be more accustomed to. So Joe, give us some tips. How do we engage children? And then Emily, I know you have ideas on that too that you've tried as a teacher. So let's hear about some of those. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I'm going to leave the younger kids to Emily because I know that they're a little bit different in their needs. But in my own teaching, it's so important to me that people collaborate and connect on mathematical ideas, that I have pulled out for my classes all of the rich tasks that I think will work well online or better online. And as I mentioned, giving everyone a link to a Google Jamboard, which is a free whiteboard space, so that everybody can jump in and share visual thinking. I also love number talks online. I know most teachers know about those kind of practices. Dot cards are really great for the little ones as well. And just, so I'm throwing out number problems to my students and asking the different strategies they use, and then we're recording them together. We're putting visuals on the document. So I think keeping the interactive space is really important, and any ways we can do that. Emily, I'd love to hear how you're doing it with the younger students.
So a couple of things have worked well with younger children. So one thing we do in the classroom with young kids are quick images, and Joe referenced dot cards. And so we do some of those quick images with dots or friendly formations. And so actually, can you do quick images the same way I would in the classroom and do them virtually? So I usually create either Google Slides or PowerPoint and put a blank slide between each one, so I can quickly toggle, show the image and take it right back away. And so that worked actually very seamlessly, and I've done it with students individually over the summer as well to kind of test it out. And that's one easy way to keep their attention. And then as long as you can sort of still see the kids you have, so you know, on Zoom or Google Meet, you can sort of still see the kids, because you want to be able to see them like giving a thumbs up or things like that, so you can get them in and participating. And with younger kids, you do tend to want to have a smaller group at a time. So you can't have, you know, more than 10. You can't have even 10 kindergartners at once. You need to have like 3 or 4 at a time, because they just can't handle this type of communication and taking turns. But so if you are able to do that in smaller groups, which I was able to do that with my school, that's can be very helpful if you can get those numbers down to a smaller group. Another thing that I have found to be helpful with younger children is having some sort of document camera set up. And many of us aren't going to have document cameras at home, but you can rig up your iPhone or your cell phone or your iPad and sort of rig it up as a document camera. There's different ways to do that. I found that young children in particular liked to see my hand moving. So if I set it up as a document camera and I just was writing on a pad and modeling their thinking on a number line or an array or with some sort of picture, they paid attention a lot better watching my hand move and writing versus me trying to do some sort of whiteboard share on my screen. So there's just something about that with young kids. There's probably some psychology around that, but those are 2 things I found really helpful with young kids. And then also having, if you're able to do any sort of check-ins where you're just meeting with the kids for 10 or 15 minutes one-on-one. And sometimes they talk about, you know, all sorts of stuff they need to talk about with you, but it's also a good time to sneak in like a mini lesson with a math rack or something like that too. So you can sort of sneak in different ways to reach them. And then also their parents are often nearby. So if you are in a hybrid model or you're online with kids, their parents are often nearby and they are listening to the questions we're asking. And so then they start asking those questions to their kids when they're doing math games or just playing games at home. They are totally picking up on all that. So that's another helpful thing with youngsters.
Can I just on Monday, if you've been tuning in to the NCTM 100 Days of Professional Development, just on Monday, Zach Champagne modeled how he uses his iPad as a document camera. So you can go to that recording, right, Robert?
Great.
That is correct, Zach. He showed it, and a lot of people responded pretty positively to it as well. And I've seen teachers use not only the iPad but the iPhone as well. The iPhone work. I'm assuming the Android phone probably work as well, but I haven't tried it with Android.
Great. And Mike, you're teaching an online course coming up soon, correct? Aren't you teaching an institute on how to do online learning very shortly?
Yeah, I have a number, one for professional development providers, one for teachers, and then I have a self-paced one that's running right now as well, with a lot of these kind of tricks, like how to set up like iPhone hacks and Android hacks and everything. But a lot of it is around using Zoom or Google Meet as a way to interact. One thing I can tell you, just what we learned over the years at Mount Holyoke, is low tech is honestly the easiest way to go. Yeah. Some ways you'd think, as someone who's been doing distance learning as long as I have, that I'd have all the apps and bells and whistles, but I'm kind of a tech minimalist. We really use Zoom and Google for our graduate program, and we use paper and pencil actually paper and marker because it shows up better on camera, but that's pretty much the go-to for us, just because it's the comfort area for most people. And the way we found is that the less tech you ask students to think about, the more their brains can focus on the content.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
when necessary, add some technology because it might make it more accessible and it might help the content solidify better. But if not, ask yourself, is the tech getting in the way? And if it is, strip it down and go to the bare basics, because it's all about the good teaching, not necessarily the application.
Yeah,
Right.
we actually used Emily's idea of the PowerPoint with the blank page in between. And that's what we've done with all our online resources. We've just built PowerPoints and JPEGs of all of the things teachers are going to need to teach CFLM, and they can just be inserted up into slides that are writable. Walter, you've been working on this all summer too. Do you, with your teachers, do you want to share some of the things that you've done in your district with your teachers?
Sure. One of the first things we did is we really did look at what are the big ideas within a unit, and tried to put them in sequence developmentally as a progression. And then teachers have flexibility to move forward and back within their own planning related to that. We're also have been providing a lot of video and of mini lessons, 5-minute clip kind of things, either setting up the context or setting up the situation or explaining some things, so that teachers are focusing on the instruction with their kids. And one of the main points that we really heard loudly and clearly from teachers was whole group was really great for social emotional, but it was the small group that was powerful in the work with kids. And with some of these video clips, they could even send it home, sort of the flipped classroom approach as a homework, and engage them in a task, and then in the following day follow up with kids and engage them in their thinking process. To the point that was made just a moment about the slides, Google Slides. Some teachers have shared with me they presented a problem. Each child in the class had their own slide with which to respond, and then they would engage kids in responding to 2 other kids in the classroom, their strategies, or do a Padlet comment or something of that nature, to engage them in looking at each other's work, and using that in terms of their planning. And even selecting a few examples, the following day to say, now reflect on these 3 representative samples of what kids are doing in the classroom, and have them think about their own thinking or evaluate and compare the different strategies. So those are some of the things that we're trying to provide as suggestions within our documents for teachers. It really is trying to provide them with the resources so that they can focus on really the interactions with the kids, how to capture information from on student thinking.
I think being able to see what children are doing on their work from a distance is critical. And so the idea that you're offering where kids share with each other as well, they can be in small groups, they can be in a Google Meet, just 2 or 3 kids to talk about what they did and share. They can do it with low tech and FaceTime each other and talk about their strategies and make their posters together that way. I think what you said, Mike, about go as low tech as you can. Don't make it complicated. Just stay focused on it's the interaction that really matters. Other points that people want to make that have not come up yet.
I wanted to address the social emotional learning aspect of all of this. Can we show that graphic, Cathy? Well, this graphic that we are going to see in a moment is what I believe are 3 keys to successful remote learning. And the first is strong relationships and building that wonderful classroom community. We have to address first our stress resilience, giving them some tools, how to build their self-awareness. Someone earlier was talking about self-efficacy, knowing that you have the ability to do whatever task is being put in front of you, how to regulate their emotions, And how do we establish group work and these tasks and listening to someone else? That's healthy relationships. So all of those are social emotional learning competencies. And then you can see the next one goes to executive functioning. That's all of our life skills, everything that we do to make decisions. When students do not have strong executive functioning skills, they have problems working with others, listening. So all these three, they go together. And then of course, how we differentiate to our students and giving that feedback. As was Walter said earlier, this is a wonderful opportunity to embrace having smaller groups and really giving students that feedback. This is a very stressful and troubling time on so many levels. So to see your teacher's face, hear their voice, say something wonderful into you, to say you are an amazing scientist, mathematician, writer, reader, whatever it is, and wherever you are, I'm just going to help you. We're just going to chunk a little bit, because our brain can't, just like Mike said earlier, the overwhelming long emails or long lessons. We need small chunks. One of the ways that I suggest is that we do if you have an hour or 70-minute block, that you do 20 minutes, 5-minute break, 20 minutes, 5-minute break, 20 minutes, because we need to teach our children the way the brain works. So if we, like Emily said, we're having in those emotional check-ins, I suggest a Wellness Wednesday, that you really focus on mindfulness and breathing and letting the students talk. How they're feeling about whatever it is. Maybe you can incorporate that in some of your math lessons, but that is what's going to help. And I think about Emily as a kindergarten teacher, a new set of kindergartners online. So it's really going to, it is across the grades, but we really have to build those relationships and establish that cohesive community. We are a community of respect, of community of learners, as well as let them see you make mistakes, and that it's just the culture of we are all learning, and I value you, you will be heard, and you are precious to me. Mm-hmm. When students know that you think that they're precious, they will work hard for you. And parents, I have 2 children myself. We are nervous because we want to know that this person cares about our children like they do. So we have to exude as much joy and warmth as we can, and just make our children feel valued.
Yeah. And I'd like to add on to that, in that when you're building those relationships with children and giving them a voice and knowing that someone is listening to them, that is a part of that equity access piece. Children are getting the opportunity to tell you about things from their perspective, and a gifted or a teacher that's really trying to listen and having conversations with kids are building those relationships and building a community in class. So that would lead you to that small group learning. And the idea is, what are the other students doing while you're with the small group? Are they coloring? Are they counting things? That can be done. So they might be off for 20 minutes while you're working with a small group in that 20 minutes and building those relationships and that community. And maybe you're not putting the children together with what you think are strengths. You have everyone together so that everyone gets a chance to hear other people's ideas, because even the ideas that we think are less eloquent might be the language for the child that's trying to negotiate what's going on. So having heterogeneous groupings would be helpful for all children, for the children who are thinking different ways, hearing each other's work.
Yep. Peter, can you take us back to full screen? Yeah, thanks. And Mike, you jump in here. We only have a couple of minutes, but I know that you wanted to talk about one model, and this gets at what Dina just said now, is that if we're in a blended situation, and we are back, you mentioned earlier very briefly in your 2 minutes that some people could be online And this, if they're online in the classroom, then there's things that they could be looking at online. DreamBox is one right there with Dave here, but there's also options of things you have kids making and doing. And anyway, jump in. You wanted to say something about doing online in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes when we think of distance learning, we think of like whoever's online has a separate experience than the ones in class, but it can actually be the same thing. That's what we do in the graduate program, but I've been supporting K-12 schools in doing the same thing. If we recognize that the folks that are online, the only difference is that they're seeing us through a screen, and they may have some accessibility issues in terms of manipulatives that they might need, and so virtual manipulatives are helpful. We can also give paper copies or things for students online, but the idea is that you could teach the exact same way you would teach to your classroom with kids there, to the folks who are also online. And if you have both, if you have some in class, socially distanced, if that's the safe alternative, if that's it's deemed a safe approach, you could have a teacher in the classroom with a small population of kids and the rest of the class online. But if the teacher can engage the online audience the exact same way, which means making an effort to look at the camera and address them as they're talking to the whole group, and in treating that online group as if they're sitting right in the classroom, you can make the experience for the online learner feel like they're in the room. And if they have as good of access to the materials and the content, and it's a good, rich lesson and great tasks, then the learning is pretty much the same. We've done some empirical studies of this with our with adult learners, and found that there's no discernible difference between the online learning and the on-campus learning. And I'm seeing this translate now to K-12. So it just takes a little bit of training, a little bit of work to get used to that space, but it's possible. And I'd like to have people try to aspire to that level of teaching to just up the ante.
And that's a way of bringing the walls down. And I think sometimes we get stuck because we're all still so entrenched in the structures we're used to. One classroom, 30 kids, teachers the font of wisdom. We try to move away and make it more inquiry-based, but it's still so teacher-centered. And we need to take those barriers down and not let them be obstacles, and try new models for small group, for access, for, we have to stop. Our time is up. I want to give anybody a chance here to also say if you have something coming up that you think would be helpful for attendees to know about. I'll share one. Emily is going to be putting together a whole slew of courses through New Perspectives on Learning on our new online tools with the parent notes, and also with the apps that people will be able to use. So if that interests you, go to New Perspectives on Learning. Who else? What are you doing? What do you want people to know about?
Cathy, can I just recommend your parent guide? Has lots of strategies. I think that's a really great guide for parents. It's very simple. Like what Mike was saying, there's like, it's not text heavy. And I think that's a great guide that parents could pick up to help them navigate, the mathematics.
Yeah, and that's not the parent notes. That's a book that I published with Catherine Kellison years ago. It's a short little book on the different kinds of strategies.
English and Spanish.
And it is in Spanish, yes. Amazon has it. Who else? Anybody want to mention something they're doing that's coming up?
I would invite everyone. NCTM for the last couple of months have been doing 100 days of professional learning, and this week is back to school week. And tomorrow night, you'll be able to see Christine and myself again. We're doing a session tomorrow night together.
Great, good.
Maybe I could add, I'm going to go to that session, but I could also add that I have a new online class. It's free and it's sharing lots of online teaching. Most of the people who've taken it already, it's only been open a week. The vast majority are saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this format in my online teaching. So I think it's helpful for this issue.
Great, great.
Yeah. I just
do people know how to get in touch? Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'm running a free forum monthly coming up, which is just to tackle distance learning challenges that are coming up as people encounter them. So they're going to accommodate people at different time zones. The dates and stuff are on there. I'll add the spring dates later, but this is just a place for anyone doing distance learning that's hitting a wall with some areas. We're going to tackle challenges. It's not going to be a formal presentation. It's going to be sort of like a PLC, open to anyone who wants to join. It just helps us to troubleshoot. It's a great place. And then I have an online course through grassworkshops.com. If people are interested in doing something more formal, you can go ahead and check that out as well.
Great. Thank you so much, all of you, for giving of your time to do this. And we'll sign off.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Good
Bye.
luck.
Good
Nice to see
night.
you all.
Good start to the year.